Welcome to me finding out my entire life was a lie at 24 years old. A family secret I can finally tell because my mother is no longer here to give me a pela for telling the family business. My dad was dying of terminal lung cancer and was in hospice at home. One day while I was taking care of him, he pulled me close because he could barely speak and said, "I need to tell you something, because I won't be able to rest if you didn't know the truth." Then he looked at me and said, "I'm not your father." And all I could say was, "It's okay. I love you anyway. You're my dad." But inside I was thinking, what the fuck do you mean you're not my father? So after my dad told me on his deathbed that he wasn't actually my biological father, obviously I went straight to my mother. And mind you, my life was already a complete shit show. I was recently separated from my then husband. I had a toddler. I was living back at my parents' house, and my mom was watching her husband die. So at the time, she had absolutely no emotional capacity for the questions I suddenly had. So she basically brushed me off. After my dad died, eventually I started asking again, because obviously I want to know. Her response was always some version of, "Why does it matter? You had a great father. He raised you. He loved you. Why are you looking for somebody else?" And she was right. I did have a great father, but I wasn't trying to replace my dad. I just wanted to know where I came from. So I started asking other family members, and that's when I realized everybody knew except me. But they all gave me the same answer. Why does it matter? You had a great father. And eventually my mom told me she couldn't even remember who my biological father was. Oh yeah. So after my mom finally told me that she didn't remember who my biological father was, I was basically left with no answers. Fast forward to 2018, I'm 31 going on 32 years old, and I decided I'm going to figure this shit out by myself. I contacted the hospital where I was born, hoping they might have some old records that they could give me, literally anything. They had already destroyed the records from the year I was born. I reached out to elected officials to see if there was some other way to find records. Nothing. I started asking family in the Dominican Republic if there was anything they could find. But imagínate, we're talking about the Campos in the 80s. Eventually, I had to accept that there was a man somewhere out there who was my biological father. Maybe he knew I existed, maybe he didn't, but I was probably never going to know who he was, and I had to make peace with the fact that I might never get that closure. Until one day, I saw a commercial for the Ancestry DNA kit, and it was on sale for Christmas, so I bought one, and that is when the story gets fucking crazy. So when we left off, I had basically accepted that I was probably never going to know who my biological father was, and then I bought an Ancestry DNA kit. Now, I wasn't really expecting anything crazy to happen. I wanted to know my ancestry, and in the back of my mind, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'll get lucky and find someone connected to my biological father's side. But I definitely wasn't holding my breath. So I took the test, sent it in, and waited. Then eventually my results came back, and as I'm looking through them, I see that I have a close family match. And I'm like, okay, what the hell does that mean? At the time, Ancestry basically told me the person could potentially be a first cousin or a half sibling. And I messaged her. We started talking and trying to piece together how we could possibly be related. Who are your parents? Where is your family from? And the more we talked, the more we started realizing there was a very real possibility that this woman was my half-sister. My half-sister, y'all! I had finally accepted that I might never know anything about this entire half of me. And now I'm looking at the profile of a complete stranger thinking, shit, is this my sister? So we kept talking. She connected me with another one of her siblings, a brother, which potentially meant my brother. And most importantly, they knew exactly who their father was. The man I had spent years trying to find suddenly had a name. And then my supposed half-sister did something I honestly wasn't prepared for. She gave me his number. So after all these years of wondering who my biological father was, I picked up the phone and I called him. So when we left off, my supposed half-sister had given me my biological father's phone number. I called him, except his wife answered. Now, apparently word had already gotten back to them that there was some random woman going around saying that she might be his long lost daughter. So I asked to speak to him, and for the sake of the story, we're gonna call him Don Julio. She asked who I was, I explained everything. And basically her response was, "We're not idiots, you're not going to scam us." And she hung up the phone on me. Esa mama suma. So naturally I called back and eventually I got Don Julio on the phone. I explained everything to him and he told me that he had absolutely no recollection of my mother. And honestly, I understood his hesitation. Imagine somebody calling out of the nowhere more than 30 years later saying, "Hi, I think I'm your daughter." So I told them, look, we don't have to guess. I'll pay for a DNA test. I called the same DNA testing company used by Maury. I paid for the test. I submitted my sample. I found the testing location closest to him. I gave him all the info. Literally all this man had to do was show up and give them his samples. So I waited and waited and waited until I was getting close to losing the money I had already paid for the test, and that's when I realized I didn't necessarily need Don Julio's DNA. So I reached out to the man I believed was my half-brother and asked him if he would test with me, and unlike his father, he said yes. He submitted his sample the very next day, and then we waited until finally the results came back. According to the test, there was a 99.98% probability that this man was my half-sibling. My supposed brother was my brother, which meant I finally had the answer I spent years looking for. So naturally, I picked up the phone and called Don Julio back. So when we left off, the DNA test came back showing 99.98% probability that the man I thought was my half-brother was my half-brother. So naturally I called Don Julio back because at this point he had to believe me, right? Yeah, no. Wrong. This man was mad. He basically told me I was a freca for going behind his back and doing the DNA test with his son instead of waiting to do it with him. According to him, the test is supposed to be between you and me, and he kept insisting that he didn't remember my mother. So I told him, okay, but if that's your son and the DNA says that he and I are half siblings, then there's your proof. Now, if you're telling me that that's not your son, then we have a completely different family secret on our hands. As far as for him not remembering my mother, look, it was the 80s. I wasn't there. I can't tell you what you and my mother did or didn't do. All I know is I'm here, so clearly something happened. He finally told me, I'll call you when I have time to take the DNA test. That conversation happened about 5 years ago. I'm still waiting for that call. But here's something I learned later that made the story even messier. Apparently, at the time he would have been with my mother, Don Julio was married to my brother's mother. Oigan eso. So I eventually learned that I am number 7 of 8 children, and 4 of us were born in August. 4. So apparently Don Julio really enjoyed Thanksgiving and Nochebuena food porque le picaba algo after he finished eating. 5 years later, he still hasn't called me for the DNA test, and at this point, I'm not exactly sitting by my phone. So after all of this, I know a lot of you have been wondering, do I actually have relationships with my biological siblings? The sister I originally matched with on Ancestry is actually the sibling I'm closest to. We talk often, we met in person, and out of this entire crazy story, finding her has genuinely been one of the best things that came from it. As for my brother, the one who actually took the DNA test with me, we've never gotten a chance to meet in person. He's since moved to the Dominican Republic, but the love is definitely there, and I'm sure we'll meet one day soon. Then there's my other sister, Don Julio's daughter, with his current wife, who is also his first wife. Yeah, I know. And if you remember, her mother was the one who originally thought I was trying to scam them. Well, that relationship has been a little complicated too. My sister initially thought I was a scammer, then she decided to give me a chance, and then she went back to thinking I was a scammer again. She eventually reached back out after seeing me active on social media, but both she and her mother pretty much maintain the same position. Eso no es asunto de nosotros y no nos podemos meter. And honestly, that's okay. But there is one person I spent a long time being angry with, and that's my mommy. For years, I couldn't understand her decisions, and especially after becoming a mother myself, I couldn't rationalize having a one-night stand, getting pregnant, and then keeping something that big from your child for her entire life. I was angry with her for that, and I think I had every right to be. But getting older has also showed me to see my mother as more than just my mother. She was a woman who made a poor decision and then took responsibility for that consequence of that decision. Me. She had a sick baby who needed cardiac surgery, and she took care of me. She raised me, she protected me, and she did it with the circumstances and the choices she had at the time. Was she perfect? Absolutely not. Do I agree with every decision she made? Absolutely not. But she was the best mother she knew how to be, and I love her. I forgive her, and I miss her with every ounce of my soul. As for Don Julio, I found what I was looking for. I know who he is. I know where I came from, and I don't need anything else from him. Ciao, bacalao.